Welcome back to Sunrise Daily World. Yes, we turn our attention now to politics, and we've got Chief Dumo Lulu-Briggs here with us. Was the candidate for the Accord Party. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Good morning. Thank
you. It was an interesting scenario for you, particularly, because you were in the APC. While the primaries didn't go the way you thought it should go, you then moved to Accord Party. And then, while you were in Accord Party, many were surprised when they heard that the court had removed you as the candidate of Accord Party, and before we knew what was happening, as they say, is the rest now history. What exactly happened, particularly in Accord Party?
Well, okay, well, it's rather unfortunate, Chamberlain, and if we at all times reconcile, truth with reason, the arguments that may follow shall be slim and just. I was in the APC, as you rightly stated, and then we didn't like the way the issues were, unfolding. I was very concerned, and then I did a press conference saying that, look, it doesn't look like we're going to have any kind of decent primaries in the APC, and I will not participate in that process except certain conditions were met. And of course, they went ahead and did the primaries, popular primaries, and then announced the results, and then we had several litigations that were on. And I stayed on until the end of November, towards the end of November, when I left the APC and joined the Accord. At that time, the Accord had a candidate. His name is Nelson Ameye, and he, by affidavit, that he deposed to in court, stated to the Accord that he was unable to pursue his campaigns. Therefore, he was then substituted, and then I was brought on board. Midway into the campaigns, some Precious Barido, who was acting chairman of the Accord at some point, said well that he resigned as acting chairman of the Accord on the 4th of October and conducted his own primaries on the same 4th of October. And he emerged as a candidate, unopposed. And then therefore ought to have been, nominated by the party. And the issue was, INEC had published the name of Nelson Ameye as a candidate of the party for more than a month. There was no contest by anybody or anybody else. And then the same Nelson Ameye withdrew from the contest, and I was introduced. So I didn't replace Precious Barido. If Precious Barido actually felt that, he had something to do with the nomination and all that, when INEC came up with the name of Nelson Ameye, that was a good time to have felt, hey, what's going on here? But of course, the party came out to say, we don't know him. They didn't buy any nomination form. They wanted him to show, if there was any expression of interest that he made, whom he contacted, if there were any receipts and all of that. But unfortunately, he went to court. And the judiciary, the Federal High Court gave him, judgment and said he was, the candidate.
But they said you didn't participate in the primaries, and so you could have become the candidate of a court party.
Well, no, you don't have to participate in the primaries. They've done their primaries, and then there was now a window for substitution. That substitution window, could accommodate anybody else. It doesn't have to be people who were in the primaries. And then, of course, Nelson Ameye was the only candidate of Accord in the primaries. Therefore, it would have meant that the Accord would have had no candidate at all. So it was, some kind of saving grace. And then, of course, they approached me, and then, our teaming supporters said, look, we must give this in a challenge. We must offer Rivers people a choice.
So if you had gone through the primaries, for instance, do you think the results, the outcomes would have been different?
If I'd gone through the primaries in Accord?
Yes.
Oh, well, I don't think so. I think that the orchestration that took place would still have happened, because there was no Precious Barido anywhere. And Precious Barido, it may interest you to know, is the current chairman of IPAC in Rivers State. IPAC is the Interparliamentary Advisory Council. That's, the amalgamation of all the political parties. So he is their chairman. He was one time local government caretaker committee member, in Kano local government area, appointed by the same Yenso Wike's PDP government. So he's also the same person who claims to have led 50-something other candidates, who have endorsed the PDP, and Yenso Wike for governor. So as a matter of fact, even whilst he was in court saying that, this is my ticket, this is my mandate, they had no interest in the elections. So it was just a surrogate that was planted, to create the sort of mischief that he created. So it was the meddlesomeness of the PDP. And of course, we have evidence that it was actually, being funded by the PDP.
Yeah, but it was a court that removed you.
Yes, it was the court. But some things would have happened, on the ground. Who is Precious Barrido? Not anybody knows. It's not interested in anything other than seeing the praise of the PDP and, of course, the current government.
If there wasn't that lacuna, do you think he would have had a case in court?
Well, yes. There have been several things that have been orchestrated. Someone says, oh, well, I was a candidate and all that. That's what happened. Clearly, there was no relationship between what he alleged and what really happened. There was not anything anywhere. And the National Party came out to disown him. Give us evidence that you participated in anything or that you even indicated an interest to participate in anything.
But what about those who also say that the root cause of the problem was your party in the first place? That if you had gotten it right, perhaps you would not have found any reason whatsoever to leave and get to another party. So if you had sorted it out at that stage, it might have been smooth sailing.
That's in the APC, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah, well the APC was on cruise control, and I think that the injuries that we suffered were self-inflicted. We were on cruise control, and how events played out ought not to have happened. And people of conscience, spoke out against it. And I have always said that, look, we need to keep the political space open. It's interesting that because we do not do that, every 4 years, the Rivers will find the kind of brigandage that takes place. When you close the political space, as a corollary, you will want to close the economic space. Because you recognize that if you don't do that, those with economic might can break through your political fortress and wrest political control from you.
What do you mean close the political space?
Yeah, when you don't allow for free participation, when you don't allow for individuals to aspire, and when you want to sit somewhere and decide who holds what, who becomes councillor, who becomes the House of Assembly candidate in this constituency, who becomes the gubernatorial candidate. When you stay someplace and manage those things, it means that you've closed the political space.
Who is INEC faulted?
Well,
INEC faulted in any way?
Yes.
Go ahead, answer us.
Yeah, well, the parties, we don't have to, sit back here and mention names. Unfortunately, we know all the agitations. Magnus Abbey has been on air several times, complaining about the same thing. It is the impunity of the political class that have put us in this sort of situation that we are.
What do you think necessitates that?
Well, government appears to be, the biggest thing. It appears to be the biggest thing. And then people have become, poorer by the day. We need to create a viral middle class. That group of 40–50% of society, who are independent of government, that can look government in the eye and say you're wrong and do the right thing. In a situation where we have so much hunger, it's difficult for us to achieve, the goals that we set for ourselves.
Let's look at the role of INEC in all of this. Have they done anything untoward, in your view, that will suggest to you that some misgivings were perpetrated as a result of the actions of INEC?
Well, yes. And if you look particularly, at the March 9th elections, for governor in Rivers State, what was the initial response of INEC? The press release that INEC came out with on the 10th of March. It's clear. The press release says that indications from their men on the field, that's INEC, not anybody else. Indications from their men on the field, right? What the reports from their men on the field indicate that there was widespread disruption of voting on March 9th in Rivers State. That's not my language. And that there was violence in substantial polling units and collation centers. That their men had been taken hostage, and electoral materials have been seized by unauthorized persons, including result sheets, and have been destroyed. They could no longer vouch for the safety of their personnel or the credibility of the process.
Yeah, but they didn't say in all of the governments.
No, they didn't say, but when you say that there was widespread disruption of voting, that's not my language. You can look at the press statement on the 10th. Widespread disruption of voting on March 9th. And that there was violence in substantial polling units and collation centers. And when you say that electoral materials were seized and were destroyed. You can no longer vouch for the safety of your personnel or the credibility of the process. So this is INEC, right, casting doubt on the credibility of the process on March 9th. And then subsequently you come up to say you have results from 17 local governments. And then you have from 19 local governments. You know? And then you come out with a program that says, oh, okay, well, we'll announce what we have and then we'll conduct supplementary elections on the 13th of April. And then you say, oh, there wouldn't even be need for any supplementary elections as a winner. So these are issues, you know, that should bother everybody. But justice must not only be done, but must be seen to have been done in this sort of situation, right? Whosoever, you know, is declared winner, as in this case now the incumbent governor has been declared winner, will suffer serious credibility and legitimacy, you know, issues.
Well, looking at that process, you know, when INEC said that they had disruptions, you know, some of the men, you know, were also affected. But if it didn't affect the areas or the result that they said they had, because initially some thought they should have, they had 23 local governments, but INEC said no, we had 17. And then they had announced a timetable of when, if they collated and got to the point where there was need to conduct elections, they would go ahead and conduct it. So eventually they got to where they were, then they had to announce results, having seen the margin over 750,000. So to that extent, can we then really say, well, INEC didn't do what they should have done?
Well, how did they get there in the first place? Right? You don't disown a process and then thereafter say, oh, there was a process.
No,
they disowned it. They said they couldn't vouch for the credibility of the process.
But that doesn't necessarily amount to disowning the process.
That's what I'm saying. If I have done something and I say, look, and you see, elections, like I said, you know, it's like someone appearing in court. You would want the person not just to have justice, but for everyone to believe that the person indeed had justice. But right? So if you say that, look, I disown this entire thing, I can't vouch for its credibility. Then, and it is your own exercise. I said, look, what I did now, right? No, I don't think this is the right thing. I don't think this is pure. I can't, you know, rely on this anymore. And then to the 3 days after, right, you find serious reliance on it to the point where you say, look, I think I indeed do have a winner. So these are issues that continue to face us. And we have to look at these things critically and find a way around them.
Looking at it critically, what do you think should be done now in the light of what you just said?
Well, you know, what are the options that are available at this time? We all know what the Electoral Act states. You know, at this point in time, your remedy is to approach the tribunal. You know, I mean, that's not a remedy that you do have.
But on what grounds would you be?
Well, you know, for me particularly, even on the ground that INEC said there was no election, you can't come back to the 3 days after and then declare this also something you say there wasn't.
You take that to the tribunal?
Oh yes, I mean, yeah, it's a strong point. It's a strong point. You ask INEC.
But that's not the only place. You remember that even in Bauchi, there was, first of all, a declaration that, you know, it didn't happen. And then they came back and said, look, what we said didn't happen, it actually did happen. And then we're going to continue the process.
I think the Bauchi case, you know, is quite different from the Rivers situation. In the Bauchi case, I think they said that they didn't, APC was alleging, you know, that they didn't have elections in a particular local government area. And the votes from that local government area is quite huge. And the PDP was saying, I know that elections took place. And INEC said elections took place. And INEC wanted to go ahead with the collation of the elections. And then the APC went to court to say, don't collate. So that's different. That's INEC saying that something happened here. And the parties are saying that something didn't happen. In the case of Rivers, it's INEC saying nothing happened here. And then turning back to say, oh, something happened. If INEC had disowned the elections in Tafao, you know, Balewa local government, you know, in Bauchi, for instance, and then they subsequently come back to it, that would have raised serious question marks. That's what happened in Rivers.
I thought that what INEC said at the time was disruption of the collation process. You know, not the election itself, because yes, some persons, because at that time, some results had gotten. So while they were collating, they then said, well, if they're disrupting this process, they had to then put it on hold. Yeah,
well, you know, it depends. And INEC has all the, you know, personnel that they require. And it's clear, you know, I mean, there are no babies in INEC. And if INEC wanted to communicate something, they would have been able to communicate that. So if what they wanted to communicate was to say, look, we have a few results. But we don't understand what had happened to some other areas. We need some time to understand this, so we're suspending. That would have been different.
Yeah, because if they had results in, and then they were collating it, that suggests that, well, in some areas, things went well to the extent that, well, we'll have some results. So if disruption of collation process is different from the entire election itself, isn't it? So they're two different things.
No, it's not. It's not different. But what you're saying is that, well, that you've cast significant doubt on the entire thing, because they said that there was widespread disruption of voting. So if there was widespread disruption of voting, what could have come out thereafter? So those are the critical issues taken INEC by their own statement. Well, now we have a result. Something has been announced. Whether we like it or not, I felt that was quite affronting, but that's where we are.
But it doesn't amount to the fact that cumulatively, the parts that had credible elections will be separated from the ones that did not.
Yeah, that's assuming that there were parts that had credible elections, which INEC's initial press statement didn't indicate. INEC's initial press statement was a complete condemnation of the process. But when you say that this whole thing, I can't vouch what I'm doing, I can't vouch for its credibility. It's not saying that, oh, well...
Even though I was trying to look at their release and see if they actually said...
on March 10th, the first release. Yeah.
Okay, well, our colleague Makwe has some questions for you. Makwe?
Guess to set some things in perspective for us. Just wondering, in Rivers, we do know that the major opposition party in the state, the APC, was not contested in the elections as a result of a Supreme Court ruling. We also know that the Accord Party, their house was not together. He was candidate of the Accord Party up almost until the eve of the elections. And so it would seem that they had very little time to campaign as well. There were rumors that the AAC was being backed by the APC. We've since heard from the APC at the national level that they knew nothing about that. Precisely what do you think caused the disruption in Rivers State, since it looked like the PDP was going to have a free run?
Well, I think it's a strong supposition to state that the PDP was going to have a free run. It was an electoral process. It was a contest. And then it was clear that I was on the ballot and I was a strong contender. The AAC, of course, was also backed by the APC in Rivers. I know that the national chairman of APC says, it doesn't know about any such thing that happened, any such alliance between the AAC and the APC. And then I also know that the public secretary of the APC, a few days after, tried to clarify what the national chairman said. And then he said, well, that yes, there was no alliance at the level of the national, working committee of the APC. But that didn't mean that there were no local arrangements that were made. And I think that's what, the police secretary said. And although I know that 3 or so days subsequent, they say the APC didn't participate in the elections in Rivers, and therefore they have no interest, in the elections in Rivers. Again, I think that, it was quite offensive to Rivers people that 48 hours, to an election,